Hello and welcome to a quick interview with Moving Communities. Today I'm talking to Mike Hill at LeisureNet, and Mike's going to talk to us about the customer experience survey. So Mike, can you give us a bit of an idea? Why are we doing a customer experience survey as part of the Moving Communities platform?
Thanks, Dave. It's a vital part of the whole Moving Communities project. It's going to give us some elements which we just can't get from the data alone. So it's going to give you that customer experience part, but also a lot more detailed information on the demographic side of things, and also a lot of attitudinal, perceptional type stuff, which we just can't get through the other means. So it's an absolutely vital part. I think it's going to give us, at least a third to half of the really valuable insights that we're going to get from Moving Communities.
So I guess it's because we can cross-reference the details of particular demographic groups against the other data that we've got around income and expenditure, quality, participation, utilisation, and of course the social value piece. So I suppose it means when we start really cutting and digging down into the details, we're going to get much more insight and intelligence from it.
Yeah. So, for example, there's a couple of things. The first group of questions is around demographics. Now, we get a certain amount of demographic information from the information that's going to come through principally from Data Hub automatically, which is great. But Data Hub's not brilliant on ethnicity and disability. So, and they're two vital target groups or informants of the KPIs that let us know how representative people's user bases are of those people in your community. So we're relying on the customer experience survey to provide us with ethnicity and disability information, but also just to finish off on the demographics, also we're asking some standard questions about socioeconomic status. So again, we get postcodes perhaps from the customer experience survey, which is good for indices of multiple deprivation, that 1 to 10 scale. But we also want to be able to look at things, what they call the NSEC type data in terms of those groups. And to do that, we need to ask about people's jobs and their employment status. So we're going to get a lot more granular demographic information from this survey.
Okay, excellent. So one section of the survey is going to be around demographics. What else? What are the sorts of questions are we asking in the experience?
I guess the questions, and there's not too many because we want to keep it short. We want to keep it about 5 to 7 minutes from completion. Otherwise, people will lose interest. But you can divide them up into 4 or 5 key areas. So first of all, we've got an area about usage, 1 or 2 questions about usage, so we understand what they're actually participating in the site. And that's useful for then cross-tabbing with some of the other information. So the second section is around the customer experience. So we've got 3 or 4 key questions in there. We're focusing on Net Promoter Score, not surprisingly. We've also got the customer confidence index or indicator in there, which is the new one that LeisureNet's developed over the last 12 months to try and establish how comfortable people are with coming back. And then the other 2 customer experience questions focus on cleanliness and hygiene, because we know that that's really the key factor that's going to predetermine how comfortable people feel, and the NPS score. So that's the sort of customer experience side of things. We've then got some questions around activity levels, and we're asking 3 of those questions. So we'll be able to establish how much activity they're undertaking, but also what's the split, what's the total, what's happening in the leisure centre, and what's happening outside, because we're really interested to see whether that's changed or is going to change in the future with people not being able to access their local leisure centres. And then we've got some really interesting, much more qualitative questions around impact and future plans. So the impact ones are going to be asking people how valuable, how important they feel that their local leisure centres are to them in terms of keeping them motivated and keeping them active. And then around the future planning, it's asking them what their intentions are going forward. Do they think they'll use the leisure centre as much as they used to? Are they going to use it more? So if you wrap all of that stuff up, we've only got about 12, 14 questions, but some really valuable stuff's going to come out of it.
No, absolutely. That sounds really interesting. So what's the timetable? When are we communicating with local authorities and operators, and when are we expecting them to distribute the survey?
Okay, so we're recording this on the 15th of April. Yesterday, the first communication went out to local authorities laying out the details and the timelines. And the next communication is going to go out in the next couple of days, which will clearly identify who we want them to send it out to and when. But in general terms, we'll be giving everyone all the information they require to send out the email on the 4th of May. So it's about 2.5 weeks time. We're giving people a good lead in, and by then they'll have had plenty of notice. They'll have all the information they need in terms of how to send it out, who to send it out to. We're even giving them the words to put into that email address. Now the survey is going to be open for 2 weeks, but after a week we'll be checking response levels, and if anyone's not sent it out at all, got zero response, got a disproportionately low response, because bear in mind we're going to know how many people are going to be coming into the centre, so we'll have a good idea of how many people are going to be responding to these surveys. Then after a week we'll give people a nudge and just say, have you sent it out? If perhaps you haven't sent it out to everyone like you should do. It will then close after the 2 weeks, and we're hopeful that within a week of closing we'll have some useful insights, useful information up online for them to look at.
Okay, excellent. And you've mentioned distributing the survey. Expecting the leisure centres to distribute the survey to?
Yeah, I guess there's some key criteria. We want them to send it to everyone who's visited in that first 3 weeks. Right. That's really important. And that people may say, well, that's an awful lot of people, but that's great. This is an opportunity for us to get a massive national survey.
Yeah.
So we're hoping minimum 50,000, but I'm hoping it's going to be closer to 75, 80, 100,000, the biggest survey of its type ever undertaken in our sector. So that's great from a national point of view, but also locally, it's going to be really important that on a site basis, because they're going to get their results of this survey by site and by contract or local authority. So it's really important that on a site basis that we try and get up to 100, perhaps minimum 200, 300, 400 for the bigger sites. Response levels. We know it's an online survey. It's very short. We're hoping that we'll get towards the higher range of what's a typical response rate. So if we can get 15 to 20% of people to respond, that's pretty good for an online survey. And then there's just a few other criteria that people have to fulfill. Obviously, really important that they've opted in to marketing comms, and that's up to the operators and local authorities to check that. The survey is only open to those people 16 and over. So we'll be asking operators and local authorities to screen out anyone who's under 16. And then the second question we ask the first question we ask is how old people are, and just to double check. And we can't ask this to anyone who's under 16. And there may be one or two other criteria which will be confirmed in this next email that's going to be going out. But in essence, it's everyone over 16 who's opted into the marketing. The more that we can get the email invite out, the larger the number will be when we get that 15-20% response.
Absolutely. And I guess that the fact that a lot of organisations are still booking because of the COVID secure pieces, so you've got to book for a swim, should give organisations an awful lot of contact detail and widen the breadth of who the survey would go to. So that must be really positive from the survey point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the problems, one of the weaknesses with online surveys is in the past is, well, who's going to respond to it? Well, the starting point is we can only send it out to people that have got email addresses. Who have you got email addresses for? You're much more likely to have it for members than casual users. But at the moment, it's a bit of a perfect storm, because pretty much everyone who's going to be coming back to most facilities has to book in some way, and a lot of that's going to be done online. If you need to book in online, then you'll be giving email addresses out and hopefully opted into marketing comms as well. So, whereas before perhaps there was a 50-50 split between member usage and casual usage, hopefully that's going to be much more like 80-20, 90-10. So yes, the numbers will go out, but more importantly, the people that we're now emailing out and inviting to complete this survey should be much representative of the cohort, the community of the leisure centre users as a whole.
Absolutely. Okay, you've got a minute left on the interview, Mike. So what's your greatest hope for the insight, the intelligence that we're going to generate from this experience survey?
I guess for me, there's probably the two areas. First of all, the customer experience itself. We've got a long a history of measuring NPS in this sector. So we've got a good idea of what the benchmarks are and what the ranges typically are. And also operators and sites will have their own NPS. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether the sorts of people that are coming back and the sort of experience they're having is changed, has moved those net promoter scores. Mm. Put on top of that the confidence indicator, which I think is a perfect complement to the NPS because it's zoning in specifically on how comfortable people feel. And what's more important than to get a measure at the moment, how comfortable people feel. And then finally, Dave, I think it's that thing about, it's not just the numbers, it's about who's using us. COVID has exacerbated that word, increased inequalities across a whole range of indicators in our society. And we need to be really careful that it doesn't do that in terms of leisure centre usage and more widely physical activity levels.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Mike, thank you so much for that. Really useful. And I hope people use this as a resource to understand what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. So Mike, thanks for your time. And I look forward to the first. Cheers.
Cheers now.